Next up, I want to invite Simona to talk about how we can learn and do better governance as DAOs become more and more prevalent. She's been part of something, so many DAOs over the last few years that we've kind of come up with and we kind of know of. And the goal is to kind of have an interesting chat about some of the lessons learned, some of the things that we think we can apply in the future, and some things that we know that didn't work and why. So without further ado, let's welcome Simona on stage.
Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Still technically morning.
Yes. It's morning somewhere.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, we've known each other for quite some time, but this is our first time officially talking on a stage setting where people can also listen to our conversation, at least willingly.
Okay.
So I'm excited to talk to you about a lot of things, but something interesting happened this morning. And if you follow Simona on Twitter, you may already know. But for those of you who don't, I'd love for you to tell us what did you announce today and the decision that led you to announce this.
So again, it's something that I've kind of been mulling over for a while, and finally made the decision to, I guess, formally announce it, is stepping back as a steward and the member of the Steward Council in Gitcoin. It's kind of been a slow process of coming out of that DAO, and it definitely wasn't a decision that I took lightly. And I described the reasons in that tweet, but in a nutshell, it's just been, the past few months have just been a real departure from the original ethos and kind of value set of the original founders. I've been somewhat in the Gitcoin sphere since 2018 when they built their bounties offering on the Standard Bounties protocol that I co-founded. And so we kind of were adjacent in some way throughout these past few years. And then I got a little bit more involved helping out with governance modeling and strategy in 2021, 2022. But since last year, just slowly kind of getting less and less involved. And I think, the decision today is just a clear kind of marker of that process.
Hopefully it's a good thing for you. And I know you've been thinking about that for some time now. Could you also go over a little bit more about what you did at Gitcoin DAO and sort of what your role was and sort of what sort of changed over time that led you to this announcement?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things with DAOs, as we know, we definitely want them to work, but we need to put in the work to make them work. So one of the things that I did with Gitcoin was really mapping out and working on the governance flows and the governance process to actually make it a smooth and effective and genuinely value add, I guess, dynamic. And so when I came in, I restructured and I guess redesigned a lot of the flows that were in place, or rather put in flows that weren't in place to ensure that the resource and the value did indeed flow where it needed to, and it was done in a transparent, coherent way, in a way that allowed the most participation, the most engagement, and the most, I guess, positive outcomes for deploying resources and value. So I did a lot of that in 2021, 2022. I also led up Shelling Point, which I know a lot of you have attended, the Shelling Points throughout 2022, and this final one in Denver in 2023 in February, which was my last one as a curator and steward of that particular event. So it was a lot of, I guess, multi-layered contribution, and it was, hopefully all in the service of public goods. But, the trajectory kind of changed at some point, which...
And we'll dig into that in a few minutes.
Yes.
Well, part of the reason why I'm excited to have this chat with you is not because just your involvement with Gitcoin, but there's so many other DAOs and organizations you've been part of in kind of shaping what this ecosystem is now. That I know all that stuff is in your head, but I don't think we've successfully gone that out in the past, so we're going to try that today. But what other DAOs were you part of, and sort of how did you get involved with them, and kind of would love to kind of have you touch on a little bit of what you did for each of those other DAOs as well.
So I guess primarily, I mean, it's one of the byproducts of being in this ecosystem for, the past 5-6 years is I was part of that, I guess, big DAO boom that mainly happened in 2020 when we were all stuck indoors and going, hey, we should do a bunch of DAOs, and it became easier and easier to launch a lot of DAOs. So I think in 2020, at some point, I was part of, 15 or something. It was wild because it was just happening, and you want, hopefully, to try things out and to participate, and to try to see what your participation can bring to a new structure, to a new way of doing things. So that was kind of the boom of the 2020, maybe early 2021. But a lot of enthusiasm happens at the beginning, and then, as we know, enthusiasm kind of peters out, and then you're like, what should we do now?
So you're part of, I guess, Optimism and Element, but what are some of the other ones?
Oh, no. So that was like the time of 2020, 2021, when there was a lot of starters, but not a lot of continuing the process of genuinely setting up DAOs that actually function. And so what we're seeing now, and these are the DAOs that I'm also part of, ENS, Optimism, Element, are those DAOs where we are trying to figure out what these flows and these structures are that evolve us from that, yay, let's start, to let's continue and improve and evolve. So what I'm doing in these other DAOs is lending my perspective and my energy and my efforts towards that evolution of let's actually build things that work.
I mean, 15 at any point was a lot. I mean, having one extra thing outside of your full-time job is usually something that takes up most people's time. Doing that, it must have been quite interesting. Why are you excited about DAOs? What do they mean to you, and what made you actually say yes? Even though I feel like at that time you didn't know what you were getting into, but what excites you about DAOs?
Look, I think the promise of DAOs is still there. The problem is what we have right now, and certainly what's happening in my soul, is a balance between the excitement and the sheer weight of the dread of watching them not work. And so my excitement for the space and for these structures, particularly in the past few days where we've seen so many ridiculous announcements and backtracks and real foibles in what we're trying to do and what is actually occurring, is they truly have that promise of diversifying what value means. We're so used to, in this world, the way it is, to just equate everything to money, cash money, and everything is about extraction. And we've been bastardized into this way of thinking for the past God knows how many generations. The idea with DAOs is that, and the reason why I'm saying diversifying value is because it starts becoming also about the value that is community, the value that is your individual contribution. Thank you.
That definitely deserves
the value that is your individual contribution and how it interacts with the other individual contributions at a local, regional, world level, but also across different verticals that isn't dictated by will it make money, will it make profit. It becomes something where value is multifaceted because it really is. And it allows us to kind of get back to that. Now, as I always say, and as we're seeing, it's damn hard building a new boat when you're firmly in the current boat and have to play by the current boat's rules. So we're over here trying to hammer and nail in this and while the boat we're on is doing all of this. I mean, it's an experience. So it's also very exhausting, which is why I'm saying the excitement comes with some seasickness. attached. But that is what is exciting about them. That is what the promise is. And that is why it's important to not let them repeat the same crap that we've already done, just in a different environment. It's like, I want to build a new house, but I'm going to literally build the same house just next door. I mean, why do that? Why limit? Why do we limit ourselves, Kartik? I don't know.
We'll talk about that.
Right.
I do have a question on this, but I agree. I mean, I think when most people think DAOs, they think some DeFi protocol has come up with the DAO, and they're going to use that to incentivize growth of their protocol. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just more than just financial nature. Out of curiosity, what kind of interesting things you've seen DAOs do that has nothing to do with money or like purely like finance related?
But there's so many things, right? Like if we look at the recent Optimism retroactive funding, retroactive grants, Kernel, which is a program started by one of the old co-founders of Gitcoin, in fact, which is an educational container that exists to initiate people into this ecosystem. And I think it got a lot of...
like doing courses and educational...
Yes. And also, you know, like putting people together, and a lot of projects came out of that where co-founders met and then they started building and then they got introduced to VCs. It's a really, really valuable and, dare I say, public good for onboarding into this ecosystem. And it got a really good allocation of funds in the Optimism round. And I was really, really happy to see that, because it is something that, you know, we don't want to lose. East Global is a result of, you know, this type of...
A lot of grants.
Right. A lot of grants. So it's incredibly important to, you know, what they can mobilize, scholarships to attend events. I've, you know, headed up the scholarship program for East Denver 2020.
We get students from all over the world coming in because they can't afford travel, and because these other DAOs give them scholarships to have them build cool things.
Exactly. Very important. A recent one in the ENS Small Grants round was East Brazil were building a digital membership card to essentially solve for the problem that at their last hackathon, some people snuck in and stole 30 laptops, you know, and they got funding to build that. Wonderful. Yes, that. Those types of things. And they're important things.
Solving communities' problems, and
genuine
it could
problems.
be different things that people care about in different parts of the world, and you now have a mechanism to help them effectively coordinate.
Correct.
An outcome. Very, very abstract, but we'll dig deep into it. Coming back to your house analogy, that's an interesting one. I do agree it's a little bit true, which is we kind of see that something kind of says that we're going to launch a DAO. Usually they follow the recipe of the last successful DAO that they can think of, which has done the same thing for kind of one before. And the recipe is something like, we're going to launch a DAO. Let's kind of set up a page to set up a delegate process. And then Simona's name is usually on the top of that list, because you see a lot of people who want to kind of be part of the delegate programs. And then they kind of define, these are our values, these are our mission statements. And so we want to kind of get to all these goals. And people sort of delegate their tokens to some of those people. And that's kind of the part.
Is that where you lose track?
Well, that's usually what gets more traction. Yeah. And then unless you're directly following, I feel like you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement? Like, what's...
It is a fair statement. And I think, as I said, we're definitely improving, because I want to make sure that, you know, this is a commitment to myself to not just highlight the problems, but also look at where the improvements are being made and recognizing those and celebrating those improvements. I think the dedication to, once this top layer of soil is there, to actually look at what processes need to follow this starter kit, right? That, again, to your point, everybody uses, everybody sets up a Notion, sets up a Discord, does the delegate thing, does all of this, la la la, Twitter announcement, 1,000 likes, retweets, whatever. The idea is that, and the work is in creating and mapping out the flow of decision-making and resource. And as I say, resource isn't necessarily just cash money, but mapping those out before we rush to go from the starter kit to just getting some tooling. And then that's it, we're done. So everybody right now is, or not everybody, there is the pattern that we are breaking that goes starter, and then we just put a bunch of tooling and that's it, we're done.
So maybe for my own benefit too.
Yes.
What does it mean when you say people just go to tooling? Like, what are they doing? What's wrong or what's not right about it? And
of course, when I say tooling is usually there's going to be a voting situation. There's going to be a snapshot and a tally put in. There's going to be some sort of payment mechanism. There's going to be an app that then enables the payment of contributors, that then enables the payment of work streams, and so on and so forth, and da-da-da. But the point is, before you get to that, you must know where and at what stage they come in, and also who is involved in the decision-making process that leads up to a payment, that leads up to a vote, that actually ensures that the information contained in a proposal is digestible to a level where people do not just rubber stamp votes, that they actually process the information in a way that isn't going to take 10 years to do, and also be able to make an informed decision, and also be able to create an opinion for themselves that is based on context, that is based on facts and what is presented to them, and also be able to compare, okay, is this funding? Is this whatever the proposal is? Does it make sense? And is it in line with what this DAO is working towards? Is it in line with the principles of this particular DAO? Is it in line with my personal beliefs of what this DAO should be? Because that is true decision making. Right now, what tends to happen is we fall from the transparency and the clarity, because at the end of the day, transparency is just clarity. It's having a clear picture of something, a clear view. Don't stop me because I'm on the roll. God damn it. So a clear picture of what that flow is, and what tends to happen when you lose the clarity is you have shadow. What happens in the shadow? Dodgy shit. We're all, I'm sure, or at least a portion of us, I hope, working on our shadow selves. Maybe the whole point is avoid that before it comes so solidified, or we fall back into the shadow where crap happens that shouldn't be happening.
I didn't say anything.
I mean, you didn't, because I was saying everything and it was really good. Anyway, I caught it back.
I agree. I think as you were saying this thing, one thing just clicked to me was, seems like a common thing that people are conflating is that they think transparency is on what the final decision is, but not the actual decision-making process. Because everything we do is on-chain. I can see who voted for what and who didn't, or what their motivations were. All the arguments or productive conversations on these forums, it's still public, but not always around what led to that decision. And is that kind of what you meant to sort of say, that this is the biggest piece that the tooling doesn't sort of solve?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Because and I'm going to quote unquote drop some truth, but everybody knows this, is that a lot of the decisions made in DAOs are literally done within minutes of a vote closing. People usually look at what other people they know voted on. People usually look at like, does this look like more of a yes, more of a no? It's always like, this is the other thing. It's always binary, yes or no. Where's the nuance? Where is the, oh, maybe, but like this, oh, maybe, but like that. And so what I'm trying to say is a clear process. And by process, I mean almost like a certain standard of what ingredients go into the decision-making flow that would stop us, or rather curtail this tendency of not digesting anything and just mechanically voting on things at the last minute, and chances are you probably don't even know what you voted on.
So it leads to situations where certain people end up influencing.
Correct. That is also an issue, because what we're seeing, and certainly in a lot of DAOs, what you're seeing is literally the top delegators can sway a vote. And we've seen this happening. I won't name names and all of that because, but we've seen this in the history of DAOs where votes were put up for 2 days over a weekend. Nobody paid attention, and a vote passed because the major delegators voted on it. And it technically matches the process, right? Technically it hit quorum. But how many of those people how many people in that community would have wanted an opinion, the ability to vote? But again, nobody knew the vote was happening, or they didn't pay attention that the vote was happening, and it just happened.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that people, even myself included, it's kind of, you can sort of see what this looks like because it's not really a company. It's a new way of thinking about organizing and coordination, especially with just anybody can be part of it and at scale. But as we are part of this century or wherever we live, we know that there's a clear hierarchy that companies have. There's somebody usually in charge that influences the decisions. And this is like an entirely inverted model. And it's natural for you to think about, I'm just going to trust the person at the top to do this, but that doesn't always lead to the right outcomes. And
it doesn't, and I think
we're seeing symptoms of that too.
We do, and I think really the differentiation comes from, and it's slight, but I feel it's very powerful. We don't work for DAOs. We don't work for other people. We work with other people in a DAO, and that small yet incredibly important distinction allows for responsibility and accountability of your own actions and your own contributions and the value that you bring to actually be a moving piece of that puzzle. When we work for, as we do in traditional corporations, and again, for generations, we've been used to this kind of stupid dynamic, you can hide in the system. And also, for people who know how to play the system, because they've been doing it for God knows how long, again, you end up in these dodgy power imbalances that just get us right back where we started. The idea is working towards, working with, working together. That is the type of pattern and the type of mindset that we need to have when we approach these new systems. And dare I say, still, there's a lot of DAOs that are just corporations and the same goddamn model that have a facade of a DAO. It's almost like, those dodgy kind of stands and there's the thing peeling off and it's DAO, but it's ink underneath. It kind of feels like that. And that essentially drives a lot of these faux pas, a lot of these things that are happening, and we've seen so many even this week or in the past 2 weeks happen time and time again. And until we, number one, change the intention, and number two, change that process, we're going to still fall into the same pattern, same old. Again, optimistically, I think we can do that. Because
And this is not
we can do it. Come on.
Yeah, this is a thing that requires time and self-reflection, which is what we're doing here on stage.
Right.
We're talking about this and recommending what things we know don't work. It doesn't mean we know what the right answers are, but we know what the wrong answers were for sure.
I think even us having this conversation is genuinely, a step towards that. So hopefully.
Yeah, and for the next 15 DAOs you join, you get to recommend some better practices that help you stay on the mission and make sure that you get to, manage when you are off track and in the value generation or creation piece. Um, we talked about a lot of problems, or rather learnings. If somebody were to think about starting fresh, what's a good recipe for a successfully managed DAO in 2023?
So again, coming back to, and a lot of you or some may know this, but one of the things that I've been looking at lately, again, in this kind of attempt to get back to a certain sense of flow and a certain sense of logic when it comes to the processes that need to exist in a DAO, because a DAO is a complex flow network, right? There's funding, there's decision-making, there's resource, all of that. Where you also find this is in nature. And one of the talks that and what I've been exploring is a lot of biomimicry stuff, right? Like how are complex flow networks in nature mapped out, and how do they exist, and how do they survive, and how they have been surviving for a few billion years, which kind of is a good track record, particularly when you talk R&D. And one of the things that comes up time and time again in the way these ecosystems exist naturally is this clarity of flow and the different nodes that flow touches. And the fact that some nodes have weaker connections with each other and others have stronger connections with each other. I think right now we're in this place, and I will get back to the practical thing, just tiny parenthesis. What we tend to do is it's either too many things and we make decisions on everything, or there's too few. There's none of that bit in the middle, which is where the juicy, good functioning stuff is. And so what I am suggesting and what I propose, and some people don't necessarily like this, but I believe that a level of standardization in the baseline of that flow is necessary. The reason I say this, all of us here are very different. What do we have in common? Our vein system. If it doesn't irrigate the certain organs with blood, the organism doesn't function. And what we're trying to do normally is add a whole bunch of stuff like a hat and a backpack and a whatever, but not pay attention to the flow of the stuff that keeps the thing alive. And so this level of standardization is very, very clear proposal format. Because what we're seeing right now is I have a proposal that's an emoji and one that has 100 pages. There's such like excess of differentiation between these things that make the effort of digesting, the effort of understanding what a proposal is, what the decision is, incredibly laborious, which is why most people don't do it. So what I'm proposing is this patterning where there is a very clear format for a proposal that does contain certain key ingredients that you just present. Don't hide it in page 25, maybe have it in a TLDR at the beginning so I know what I'm about to digest. Criteria for the proposals being put forward. What are the values of the DAO? What is the purpose of the DAO that I'm proposing my thing to? Is it even in line? If I'm going to propose some educational thing to a DAO that wants to, I don't know, organize Porsche trips, maybe that's not the best fit. But there should be that criteria that immediately curates the proposals that come in because of alignment. I'm not saying gatekeep. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying curation in the process of helping.
If anything, you're telling the DAO that this is what we don't value. So let's eliminate those cases, but you can have flexibility in, hey, maybe this is creative and we'll learn new things.
Absolutely. So again, none of this is meant to act as a gatekeeping mechanism or anything like that. It is genuinely what is the most natural flow for something to go through that is relevant for this particular DAO. Then the decision-making process. Who decides and on what do we decide? Do we decide on every single thing that we're going to do? We're going to switch from I don't know, discourse to something else. Do we need a vote on that? I don't, that's too much diversity of decision making. What we want is the sweet spot in the middle, because then you don't have fatigue from voting on 10,000 meaningless things. You can focus more energy and attention on the things that do matter. The other thing is some sort of cadence. We are creatures of habit. Humans like habits. When you do not, and again, what I'm trying to introduce here is our habits that help you focus more energy and attention to the things that generally need it. Imagine waking up every morning and having to tie your shoelaces. It would be incredibly laborious and very annoying.
You mean like learning to tie?
Learning to tie your shoelaces. It's like, why do we need to do that every single time we get into a new DAO? Go like, okay, well, how do they map this? How does this work? What is this? So this is
interesting because I just realized that this is basically how college applications work. Like everybody had a different process, and then all these things came in and they created this common form that just standardized all the things that everybody should care about. And once you fill that form, you are ready to send it to any college. But not everybody has to look at all the answers or the same ones, but they just kind of combine everything to understand. And it is a standard in a way you're proposing that at least helps us figure out what to kind of quickly sift through. It may not be everything that everybody cares about, but...
And honestly, I feel that will enable the interoperability of talent far more. And of personal resource and personal value if you can just go cross DAO without this huge learning curve that you
get to filter for what you care about.
Exactly. And I think that is, and again, it takes work because we don't know how to do that because we're in this other boat where we do things really weird and whatever. But if we can stick to that and keep working at that, I think it will get us into a better place. And like I say, we've seen the evolution from the boom of the DAOs in 2020 to where we are now, right? Where there is concerted effort in figuring out how these things work. And I
see improvements. Like it's not just we're repeating everything.
Correct. And it's like, one step forward, 2 steps back. Okay, it's how learning happens. And it's not going to be overnight because none of this is going to be overnight. But that's, I feel, is a helpful step towards a successful DAO in 2023, 2024. Ball.
So DAOs are not doomed?
No. Even though you might think that, but they're not. I don't think they are.
Well, any closing thoughts on how we can make this better for people who are thinking about not just starting DAOs, but also joining them? Because it is effectively each of us that care about different causes, and we want to be part of a community that also shares those same values.
Value here is, I would say, the big one. And value alignment and making sure that whatever you join is genuinely aligned with your values. And if you see things that aren't in line with those values, and if you see things falling into the old patterns, I would genuinely urge you to find the other people who also feel like you and figure out how you can improve versus, I guess, keeping with the status quo. And just, it's one of the main reasons why I'm stepping away from Gitcoin, because I genuinely tried. But at the same time, I'm like, my energy is better spent elsewhere. And I think by helping other DAOs or by sharing the experiences that I've had, hopefully it does make people feel a lot more empowered and a lot more responsible and a lot more accountable for like, hell, actually, no, I don't agree with this, or I think this could be better, or this could possibly help us get from point A to 8.1. Whatever it is, it's small incremental steps, but I think that the intention of genuinely wanting to change this stuff, not because you want money and clout and all of this garbage, that legitimately, I mean, the world as it is, I mean, okay, it's cool and it's fun and we go to parties, but honestly, like, we need to elevate the things that we're thinking about. If the number of Twitter followers and like all of this crap, or if you're first in the governance table or God knows what else, is like your motivation for being in DAOs, like, It's not good enough. It's not a pure intention.
It's a cliche for me to say this, but unlike large organizations, you actually have the ability to make that change and still affect a same equal size group of peers or constituents. And that's just not a thing that we are commonly aware of in anywhere else except Web3. And if you are not happy about something, you do get to actually drive for a change. You may not be 100% successful, but oftentimes change happens.
It does happen, and I think, coming back to that boat analogy, because we're like, by the sea, so it makes sense. It's very hard to genuinely switch from an extractive mindset. And again, I say, we've been bastardized into this way of thinking for a very, very long time. Our first instinct is to extract, and this is fertile new ground for all of that behavior. But the key is unlearning all of that stuff, unlearning the patterns that you would have followed in a corporation. Because again, you don't work for, you work with. You are not subservient.
You represent yourself.
You represent yourself, and the things that you bring are the things that you bring, and you have value and you bring value. And together with the other people in these new constructs, have a genuine shot at making this stuff work. But it does take commitment, and it is soul destroying sometimes, and it is exhausting because we are unlearning behaviors the same way as I'm saying, let's set up new patterns. Let's set up new behaviors. Unlearning something is fucking hard. And another thing that we all need to get very comfortable with is change. Any notion of change involves loss. This is why people hate it. This is why people hate change. It's not that they hate the new thing. Is that they hate losing the old thing. Like, even if it's decrepit and gross and you need to throw like some slippers, you need to throw them out because they're like cesspool of like bacteria. But you're like, but they're so comforting and like I've had them for a while. That's what people fear. It's not change, it's the sense of loss. And depending on who you are and what your relationship with loss is, and this is where we are all individuals because we have different relationships with loss, it's going to be harder or easier. And that's the truth.
That's sage meta observations about how DAO voting works. And I think a nice point for us to close this off today. So thank you so much for this amazing chat, and hopefully we get to make DAOs better this year.
Thanks, everyone.